Hey friend, welcome to Authentic Performance, the podcast. My name is Nat and I'm your host. At Authentic Performance, our mission is to provide education and advocacy for all athletes, developing awareness surrounding identity, purpose, and health, so athletes can live well beyond their sport. After a couple of busy weeks, we are back with another solo episode, where I am so excited to share some lessons I have learned this year as I reflect on the past 12 months. I celebrated my 22nd birthday this month, so it has been so sweet to look back on the highs and lows of this year. I hope you're encouraged by some of my experiences, both productive and unhelpful, and get some nuggets that may help you to improve your perspective or approach to life. Thanks for being here. All right, guys, welcome back to another solo episode of the podcast. I am so excited today to share just some lessons that I've learned over the last year. My birthday was in January, my 22nd birthday. So as I kind of was looking back on my year of being 21, there was a lot of lessons, encouragement, and growth that happened. In a lot of ways, the year was really sweet, and I have made new friends and found a new place to kind of call home for now, and just opportunities have come out of so many different areas of my life. But there's also been a lot of struggles and hardship, and so I'll kind of dive into some of those things and just what I've learned, and I hope it's just encouraging to you, whether you're in a similar season or just maybe trying to reflect on your own life and some things that you've learned. Sometimes it's not easy to reflect, especially when there's hard things that you've gone through. And I know it's always easier to look back on things and realize, that God was moving in some way, or that people were looking out for you, but it's sometimes really hard in the moment. So that's why I think reflection is just such a valuable tool. So we'll just dive right into it. So as I was reflecting, I kind of came up with 10 lessons that I've learned, or I guess kind of encouragement that I've received or kind of figured out through my year. So the first one is that suffering brings growth, maturity, and endurance. So throughout the last, I think, 2 years, really, for the majority of the time, I've been struggling with my back injury, which if you don't know that story, go listen to the first ever podcast episode, because you'll get to hear a little more about my injury and kind of the struggle that brought in my life, especially while I was playing college basketball. But for most of that time, I've actually had this verse on my phone screen. So I'll just give you a little peek there. I'll read it too. It's in James 1:2-4, and it says, "Consider it a great joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you experience various trials, because you know the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing." So the reason why this has been just such an important verse in my life over the last couple years is because before I really had to deal with suffering, I didn't know how to handle it, and I didn't know how to kind of cherish it and understand that it was molding me into the person that God wanted me to become. And so just kind of looking back on God's faithfulness in this season of my life where it was really hard and there was a lot of suffering, I was able to kind of see that it was all for a purpose, and that suffering has really given me the courage and confidence to speak to other people about similar situations. It's given me a very different perspective on the way that my body functions, and just appreciating exercise and good nutrition and all these things that I maybe took for granted before. So that there's really been a lot of growth and maturity, and that endurance is truthfully, in my eyes, it's having to rely on Jesus for the long haul, and knowing that you can't sustain yourself. And so, it was a couple years really of me just not really knowing what was next as far as like physical suffering or healing, or what was kind of happening. And so I had to endure, and I had to rely on the Lord, because I couldn't handle it on my own. And I came to that conclusion not as quickly as I wish I would have, because it would have been awesome to have a little more time of just like really leaning into that. But especially in this last year, I've just really had a perspective change where I'm like, this is just bringing me closer to the Lord, closer to where I'm supposed to be in a career, and really just changed a lot inside of me. And I think it's also important too to note that like suffering, when you're faced with suffering or any kind of unexpected situation, like your character really shines in those situations, and people can see the way that you handle things. And I know, like, at the beginning of my journey, I was definitely not handling any of this with grace. But I, kind of leaned in to fix my eyes on Jesus in both the good times and the bad. And it's really changed me as a person. And also just being able to like encourage other people, because that was one of the things that I really felt the Lord like trying to teach me through that season, was that you have such an influence on the people around you, and like the way that you just react to things, like to hard things, the way that you continue to rely on him when things are really hard. That shows to other people who may not know him or are maybe in a really hard situation, and they just might need that encouragement. So that is the first lesson that I learned. Suffering brings growth, maturity, and endurance. Second thing is that community is critical. I truthfully, like growing up in high school and even kind of into junior college, I didn't have a super strong like Christian community backing me. Like the church that I went to when I was a kid, and then like into high school, there was not very many people that were my age, which I don't think is super abnormal, because it is kind of a time where people are still figuring things out and not super committed necessarily. Not to say that I was just like all in, but I was, showing up with my family. That was important to our family. So it wasn't until I really got to GCU that I found this community, and it's just like changed everything for me. And just even looking ahead, like I know that it's going to be really hard to transition out of this environment and kind of into the real world, and out of college and everything. But I know like people say when it's hard to say goodbye, that that like that those people had an impact on you, and that's a really special thing. So one of the biggest things that I've kind of learned with having a community is how important accountability and encouragement is from people that are going to be completely real with you. Like you need to have someone that's going to call you on the stuff that you need to be doing better at. And it's just going to lead to growth for you. And those connections are going to be more authentic if you can be completely real and honest with people. And so it's really just so valuable to find those people that are going to grieve with you when you're going through hard times, but they're also going to celebrate the joys. If someone only wants to celebrate the happy things, like, and they're not there in the trenches, then they're probably not going to stick around when things get hard, which is when you really need those people. And so one of the areas of my life that this has been especially like super valuable is when navigating singleness too. Like I have friends, we're all kind of in the same boat, but we get to just encourage one another and be there for one another and be completely real and authentic about like the things that we might be struggling with, or the desires of our heart. Like having people to actually talk about that stuff with is so sweet. So my biggest tip with finding community, it is really hard, and it's pretty complex with like finding your people, but I would say just wherever you're at, there's not necessarily always this need to find more people. And I think that that's kind of what society makes us think, is that we just need more friends and then things are going to be better. But just like being more intentional with those that you're close to, and like having hard conversations and opening that door. And sometimes you've got to be the one to do it. But you never know, like they might be wanting that authentic relationship as well. So ultimately, I would say try to build deeper and not wider. Like you don't need more people. Just go deeper with the people that you have, and really value those friendships and relationships, because again, like they're pretty rare. But they're so important, especially as like believers, to have people that are going to just encourage you and hold you accountable in all different seasons of life. So, number 2, community is critical. Then number 3, this is one that has been very, very prevalent in my life this last year. It's okay to not know all the time. Like, you don't have to know what's going to happen in 6 months or 2 years, or, whatever your timeline is for different situations. In my current season of life, there are a lot of unknowns. I'm currently waiting on graduate school applications to be processed and decisions to be made, and thinking about jobs in the future, and even just in like singleness or relationships. Like there's a lot of unknown, and that can be really overwhelming when you try to just figure it out on your own. And for anyone who's familiar with the Enneagram, I'm a 3, which is an achiever. And one of the biggest like personality traits that I think I have from that like test is just like wanting to have control over everything. And that's just going to cause you more stress and worry, which is not worth it, because ultimately you're not going to always know everything. And as much as you want to be a planner, maybe like some things are just out of your hands. So I think just like leaning into that, and not being discouraged by the unknown, but being excited of like the things that are yet to come. So just another verse, just to like reiterate that, Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." So we don't have to know, but we know that God does. And so that's the encouraging part, is that we get to kind of sit back, and that's not to say that like you can't be real about like the way you're feeling, and that things are hard and waiting is hard, because it is. But we can be encouraged that the creator of the universe does know what's going on and what's next, even when we don't know. So number 3, it's okay to not know all the time. And trust me, I'm preaching to myself with that one a little bit, but we're getting better. Number 4, joy is a gift. So I think especially in society now, like we kind of see joy as the same as happiness, but it's not, because happiness is fleeting, and it's completely dependent on how we feel. And it's really hard to be happy all the time. Like the feelings and emotions that we have don't allow us to just always be happy. However, joy is a gift, and it's this daily choice that we have to make the most of that gift that the Lord has given us. And I'll talk more about gratitude, but I think that kind of plays into the joy piece too, of like, you can be going through a really hard time and not be happy about your circumstances, but still be joyful in what the Lord is doing in your life. So just an encouragement to really lean into the joy instead of the happiness, because that's going to be more sustainable. So number 4, joy is a gift. And now going into that piece of gratitude that I was talking about, number 5 is practicing gratitude is the key to changing your perspective. Just practicing gratitude, like there are so many positive health effects of just being grateful for the things around you. And that really just means like seeing the positive in your day every single day, even when there are hard things, which that's where I want to mention, like grief and gratitude can coexist. Everything doesn't have to be perfect for you to be grateful for things. Like even on your worst day, you can find something to be grateful for, even if it's something that seems really small. Um, just leaning into those little things sometimes is all that it takes to change your perspective on the way that life is going. Because again, that's also going to help you with that joy piece of being grateful for what you have and not focusing on what you don't have, but instead just really leaning into the blessings and the gifts that the Lord has given you. So yeah, number 5, practicing gratitude, key to changing your perspective. And this can look a lot of different ways. Maybe it's just like texting a friend every day in the morning, like, I'm grateful for this. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's just kind of in prayer. Like that's a big piece of prayer, I think, is giving thanks. But ultimately, like it doesn't have to be this huge practice, because it's just a small mindset change that eventually will start to kind of seep into other areas of life. Okay, number 6. Sometimes saying yes to the unknown is scary, but it also can bring fruit. So saying yes, not that you always need to say yes to everything, because obviously boundaries are really important, and knowing yourself and your capacity is also valuable, which is another lesson that I've had to learn. But if you're saying no to something just because you're afraid, then you're probably going to miss out on the blessing that could have been. And saying yes to something that you don't really know the outcome or exactly what is going to happen, it forces you to have faith, and just rely on what the Lord is doing in that situation and not on the things that you don't know or understand. And that's one of the biggest things that I learned this year as well, is that saying yes to things that seem kind of scary can put you in places where you have opportunities to do things that maybe you would have never anticipated. And if you hadn't said yes, then those doors wouldn't have been opened. And so, like, the biggest example that I can give is this last summer, I lived in London for 10 weeks as an intern, and I had no idea what to expect. And truthfully, like, a lot of it was very scary when I got there, and like I didn't know how to get around on the public transportation or, do daily things that were very different there in a different culture. But I was hopeful that just saying yes and kind of getting out of my comfort zone would provide like this, I guess, connection with the Lord of like, I'm trusting you in this, and I'm leaning into what you want from it. And so I think it was a really fruitful experience of just like focusing not on the things that I didn't know or the things that kind of scared me a little bit, and just being super open to what God was going to do in my life. And again, like I do think boundaries are important, and like saying yes isn't always feasible to everything, but just like changing your perspective to this could be a really good thing if I just give it to the Lord and say yes and be obedient. That can be really fruitful for all kinds of different areas of your life. So sometimes saying yes to the unknown is scary, but it also can bring a lot of fruit. Number 7, comparing your success or hardship doesn't do any good. This can kind of go on like in 2 different ways. So the first way would be like comparing your hardship to someone else, maybe in a way that puts you down or kind of makes you feel like your problems are less than. Like saying they have it worse, so like I can't complain, like someone else out there has it. Someone else out there is always going to have it worse, but that doesn't mean that the struggles that you face and the adversity that's going on in your life isn't valid. And that's not to say that like you should just complain about it all the time. Like obviously that's not having like a very positive mindset, and it's not very healthy. But you also have to be able to like get rid of those feelings and release it to someone. So like if you have someone in your life, for me it's my mom, I'll go and tell her, my issues, what's going on, how I'm feeling. And then like after that, it's like, okay, now I'm okay. I know where I'm at, but trying to avoid those problems just because someone else out there has it worse is just going to push it into the back of your mind, and it's going to surface at some point. So um, there is that side of things. But there's also like comparing your success. So like everyone else is having the things that you want, and you're, frustrated with that, and you think that, because on Instagram everyone has this perfect life, that somehow you're not measuring up. I want to be the first to tell you, everyone out there is struggling, and everyone is going through something hard, and that does not mean that your desires are wrong, but just understand that if it's not happening for you right now, it's either not for you or it's not the time for you. And we're each on a completely different timeline for everything in our lives. So comparing yourself to the people online, or even friends and family, is only going to cause more stress. So like just going back to that piece of gratitude, like whether it's your success or your hardship, just really leaning into the feeling of being grateful for what you do have, and not focusing on the things that you don't. But also like allowing hard things to just kind of suck. Like you don't have to just push it away just because, again, like other people might be dealing with harder things. There's no need for comparison. Like it's people say comparison is the thief of joy, and it truly is. In both, on both spectrums, like comparing your success and feeling like you need to be doing more, or that you know nothing good is happening for you or whatever, or also your hardships. Like it's only going to take away from the lessons you're learning in those hardships, because if you don't acknowledge that it's hard, then you probably aren't going to really be growing. um, and then also those successes, like being grateful for the things that you do have. So number 7, comparing your success or hardships doesn't do you any good. um, Number 8, ask people for help. Again, I'm an Enneagram 3, so achiever minded. It's really hard for me to kind of delegate things that I feel are important to other people, or even ask for help with like problems that I'm having, or things that are really hard for me or that I'm struggling with. Um, but you don't have to struggle on your own, and there's a reason why, like, God made us all different with different talents and abilities, and it's to work together to do the best that we can. um, and I've been reading the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which highly recommend. It's really, really good. And one of the things that like they kind of started with was talking about the difference between dependence and independence and interdependence. So like I know in our world, like everyone wants to be independent, and that's like the main thing is like, well, no, I don't need anyone else. And that is the opposite of the way we should be thinking, because like it's you don't have to be dependent on people and not be able to do things for yourself, but refusing to work alongside other people is only going to put you behind in your potential and what you could achieve, or the things that could be happening through you. So instead of focusing on independence, just try to lean into that interdependence, where you obviously have things that you're really good at and you can do on your own, but also like don't be afraid to ask people for help. People want to help you be successful. Like that's something that I think I've learned tremendously over the last year. And especially just with like the podcast stuff, like it there's no harm in just asking someone to help or be a part of something. Like yeah, it's the worst thing that they could do is say like, no, I can't help you with that, and then find someone else. Like again, most of the time people are going to show up for you, especially if it's like some of your friends. Like let them in and let them help with the things that are hard for you because, again, like, you have certain talents and gifts that they don't, and they have certain talents and gifts that you don't. So combining those gifts and talents is always going to have a better outcome, no matter what it is that you're talking about. So number 8, ask people for help. Okay, we're getting near the end here. Number 9, showing up for yourself builds confidence. And I mean this in all areas of life, but one of the most prominent places that I've seen it is in like fitness and nutrition. And a lot of this stems from Reagan Davis, who I had the pleasure of working with. She was my nutrition coach for a little while, as I was kind of transitioning out of college basketball. And she'll be on the podcast very soon, so stay tuned for that. But I remember one of the things she told me while we were working together was, you keeping promises to yourself and showing up and doing the things that you've said you're going to do is what builds that confidence, and then it just snowballs. So you saying, like, I'm going to go to the gym 4 times this week. Okay, awesome. So every time that you keep that promise and you show up and you do it, even when it's hard, you're proving to yourself that you can do what you say you're going to do. And so then the next time, maybe you're like, okay, I made it to the gym 4 days this week. I want to go 5, or I want to add in a walk or whatever. That the more you show up and prove to yourself that you can do it and that you've got it, you're capable, the more you're going to be confident in yourself to try other hard things. So the biggest thing that I've learned is just that we just have to prove to ourselves that we can do it. Like, I may tell myself that I know that I can, eat healthy and have a balanced diet, but until I actually do it, like, I'm not actually processing that I can do it. Like, even if, and again, I'm a super big advocate for like productive self-talk and like being positive towards yourself. But ultimately, if you don't show up for yourself, all you're doing is letting yourself down, and then that confidence is just going to plummet. So show up when it's easy, when it's not easy, when it's comfortable, when it's not comfortable. Just be there and show yourself that you can do hard things, because you can. You just have to kind of prove it to yourself so that then you can continue moving forward. So number 9, showing up for yourself builds confidence. And finally, number 10, which as I was kind of thinking about some of these lessons, this one almost didn't even make it on the list, which is crazy to me because I think it's probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned this year. But I think I'm still a little bit in denial and still growing in this area. But I think it's really important. And so if you take anything out of this, I think this is probably the most important one. And maybe it's not for you. Maybe it's not as much of an issue for you, and maybe you resonate with something else more. But the 10th lesson that I learned this year is that you don't need to earn rest. Rest is a gift from the Lord, and there's a reason why a lot of people practice Sabbath and rest and taking a day away from the busyness of this life, because it's biblical. It's like the Lord on the 7th day, after making everything in the universe, he rested. So this is something that I've really struggled with, especially as, again, like wanting to always be achieving and doing more. But you don't have to earn rest. You don't have to say, oh, I get to rest once I do A, B, C. You don't always have to be productive at all times or achieving. One of the biggest tips I can give, if you are someone who really struggles with this, and maybe you're a student or you work from home, or you do something that can kind of be on you at all times, is set a time that you're done, and then put the computer away, put the phone away, whatever you need to do, and just separate yourself from that. Because you don't have to keep striving and doing more. And a lot of times that's actually going to probably help your productivity if you're taking intentional time away and getting good sleep and setting boundaries. Then when you do show up, that you're there to work, and you only have to be there for a certain amount of time. It can be really easy when there's no boundary and you just are always working on stuff. It can be really easy to just always be kind of about it. Like you don't really have that fire, and that passion might almost like fizzle out a little bit because it's just a constant state of more. And we live in a super busy world and society, and I'm very busy too, and like that's I do really find a lot of joy in like being involved in a lot of different things, but I have learned that I cannot show up and be my best self in any aspect of my life, in relationships, in school, in work, in podcast stuff. Like none of that is going to be at the capacity that it should be if I don't rest and take time away. And I mean, honestly, like that creativity of whatever it is, you're working on, like whether it be just like a small passion or something, or like a full-on business that you're running, like taking time away is going to also help you with that creativity and really like honing in on what you really do want, and not getting so overwhelmed with just like the tasks that keep on coming, because there's always going to be more tasks. No matter where you're working or what you're doing, like you can always find more. And so one of the areas that I've just been really leaning into too is sleep, because obviously like there are a lot of different ways to find rest. I think it's very restful to spend time with the Lord. I've been doing more like silence and solitude practices, which has been really beneficial, but also just like getting good sleep. You're going to show up as a better human when you get a good 7 or 8 hours. And ultimately that's going to help you to do more things for the kingdom. And I know we've talked about this before with guests, but you want to be able to show up and be your best self every single day, in whatever your work is, whatever ministry, however you're encouraging other people. And rest is one of the most important things to be able to do that. So number 10, you don't need to earn rest. That's basically it for today. I hope that some of those lessons might encourage you or resonate with you. I know it's been a really sweet year, and there's been a lot of growth, which again sometimes comes from hard things, but I'm really excited for the next year, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to Authentic Performance, the podcast. We would love to hear what you found valuable in this episode, so send us a DM on Instagram at Authentic Performance, or leave us a review on whatever platform you enjoy most. We want to thank you for your continued support of this project. It truly means the world. We also want to invite you to be a part of the Authentic Performance fam, so follow us on socials and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. For more information about how to get involved or to see how we're supporting athletes, go to theauthenticperformance.com. Finally, let us know what you want to hear on the podcast and who you want to hear from. We want to give you the best possible resources and support, and your feedback helps us do that. In the meantime, think about how you can live authentically. See you next time.